todos. My name is Franca. I am your host for the Francamente podcast. I'm so excited to be here with you. Thank you so much for listening. And without further ado, let's bias your football content. Hi, welcome to another episode. What are we up to? Episode 6. Oh my goodness. Time is flying. Literally, I cannot believe that there is 2 weeks in between these episodes. It feels like it's happening every day. Oh my gosh. Lots going on. If you are watching on YouTube, we have a special guest and it's Luna the dog. She's napping very peacefully on the top of the couch, her favorite spot. What am I wearing? I'm wearing a kit that I really like that came in a mystery kit. And I believe it's Away Days that does the mystery kit thing that we've done it a couple times and we've gotten some pretty cool kits. This is FC Utrecht. How do they say that in the Netherlands? I don't know. But the reason I love it is because it's hot pink. And it's one of the few Nike kits that looks cute actually. Every single like the badge is raised, the Nike sign is raised, and it's got pink on the border too. It's really like the attention to detail is so nice, and the sleeves are hot pink. It is so sexy, and it was in a mystery kit thing. I would have never gotten it because I didn't know they did this awesome pink kit. So it's gonna be a while before I repeat kits. So if you tune in just for the kit, I love that. What is going on in the football world? This episode is going to be a stream of consciousness experiment of thoughts that come to my head that are related to football in any way. But I would be remiss if I did not start with talking about what happened to Gary Lineker, because let's remind ourselves that my tagline is what? Bias your football content. Bias your football content. And what does that mean? Precisely that we should denounce neutrality, speak on issues that matter to us, speak on social justice issues, because sports are not just sports. Right? There's issues that are bigger than sports, and especially as it relates to football, I think it is superficial, actually, to not be biased, like to expect neutrality from people that work in a sport that is inherently so political is absurd. It's ridiculous. And so I have pulled up here, just to refresh our memories, the Lineker debacle, which is that he was taken off air, right? He was taken off air because of a tweet. First of all, let's talk about the way that professionalism standards are rooted in white supremacy, misogyny, homophobia, all of those fun isms, that we are now falling so much deeper into fascism than we've ever been. Like the backslide that's going on in this country with the censorship, with the banning of professors, with professors being fired. I just heard today that there was a professor fired from a Florida university who is a white male Christian at a Christian college who happens to teach a little bit about like racial justice. He had some MLK on his syllabus, and he was fired from the college because a parent complained that they were doing racial justice discussions. So imagine the state of things when a white male Christian cisgender straight man faces a consequence. Imagine, because that never happens. The thing has to be so egregious for that to happen. And what this shows us is how egregious the level of fascism is, that's how little it takes to get a tenured professor fired. Anyway, all of this to say, fascism is global. The backslide into fascism is global. And Gary Lineker, who, by the way, is not what I would consider like a beacon of social justice a progressive figure. I wouldn't consider him like any sort of, social justice hero. Like he's cool, and for what we have, especially for a white man, he's professional, he's been around for a long time, but I would never consider him like a beacon of righteousness. And yet he was literally taken off air for a tweet on his personal account. Now, again, to go back to the professionalism standards thing, because this affects all of us, no matter what your job. I know every single person in my life that works in every single type of job is always scared to tweet the wrong thing because employers watch your social media. It's happened to me. Literally a very, very high up person, the highest up person at the institution that I teach at, stalks my Twitter that doesn't have my name on it. I don't even know how he found it. I don't ever tweet about the institution by name, and yet he's aware. Okay, this is surveillance to the nth degree. Why do we care? Now, if someone's a Nazi and they're tweeting, their Nazi stuff on their Twitter, that's okay, maybe something that we can look at. But just a regular person's regular tweet, everyday tweets, why does your employer have a right to control every aspect of your life like this? That is the most capitalist brainwashing bullshit I've ever heard. You are not paid to tweet, right? You're not paid to tweet. There's lots of jokes about this. If you're tweeting during work hours, okay, it's one thing that we can maybe consider. If I am off the clock, quote unquote, and I'm on my personal Twitter account, whatever I tweet should have nothing to do with whatever my employer does or doesn't do or looks at or whatever. Because do we have personal freedom or not? Because we love to act like we do. But here's a perfect example. Do you feel comfortable tweeting whatever the hell you want on your Twitter, or are you always worried about your employer seeing it? That is capitalist brainwashing, because who cares? Because who are they to control whatever you tweet on your personal account? Okay, so that's for starters. But so of course this is a public figure, so my point is that this affected him. It affects all of us, of course, differently. I'm not making the comparison that we're all Gary Lineker, that we're all getting surveilled, but many of us get surveilled and censored who are not public figures. And that's the point, is that this runs so deep, right? On his personal account, he tweeted comparing the language, because obviously the US is fascist as fuck, but Britain is truly doing some weirdo shit, like actual fascist stuff. The Tories are out of control, and so there's a new policy that deals with immigrants and government asylum seekers, basically cracking down on asylum seekers / immigrants, really, because there's a fine line there, right? And Gary Lineker compared the language of that policy to that of 1930s Germany, which to me is as mild of a criticism that you could possibly get. To me, that is baseline. If our governments are enacting fascist policies, the very least we should all be doing, it should actually be a requirement of all of us to tweet about it. As citizens of these countries. I mean, it's just absurd. It's such a low bar for me that was, when this all happened, I was kind of out of the loop. I wasn't really on Twitter, and I was like, what the hell could he have said? Because I was only seeing the, all the stuff about it. I was like, what the hell? I did not expect it to be that mild. I truly was floored, because first of all, we have this idea that the BBC is progressive. False. It is an arm of the government for all intents and purposes. And if the government is fascist, that's what it is, right? And so that mild of a tweet, just the very basic thing we should all do, which is call out fascism. I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone, talking about the fact that someone got pulled off air for just literally calling out actual fascism. Like I can't fathom sitting here in 2023 having this discussion, truly. But so he gets taken off the air and he doubles down. He doesn't, I don't know if he deleted the tweet technically because they maybe made him do it. I don't know. I don't know if he deleted it, but he didn't, apologize or say like, I shouldn't have said that, whatever. Like he stood by what he said. It was a very mild statement. And then immediately others came to his defense, like other figures. So the first one was Ian Wright, or the first one that was big like this was Ian Wright to come and say, I love this, what is his show? Is it Match of the Week? I forget. You know how much I love being on this, but I will not do it. He for the whole weekend, he was like, these values are more important to me to stand by. Gary Lineker, he was the first one, but then others started to, it ended up that no one did any football stuff for BBC that weekend. And it was a disaster. The backlash was luckily in support of what Gary Lineker said. A lot of people just didn't do the show. And then of course he got lots of support from folks who did their own shows, like not on the BBC, other, folks who are on other networks. And so this was a moment that I think was good. What I tweeted was, this was the definition of bias your football content. Like, more of this, please. Right? Because what happens when something like this happens is it hurts their bottom line, because yes, fascists are also out there, criticizing Lineker, like, oh my God, just do your job, don't be woke and all that bullshit. But while they're loud, they're the minority. That's the reality of it. It's a smaller number of fascists than not, even though they're loud as fuck on Twitter. So a lot of people they were like, we're going to boycott all of that stuff. And it really worked because he was reinstated pretty quickly. But the fact remains that the fascistification of society globally is a nightmare. It's a nightmare. This is really dangerous territory. And I still am not sure if there's another outlet that will talk about this stuff so openly, at least like we do, right? Because what are we doing? I ask this every episode. What are we doing if this moment is considered so radical? If it's considered, he's like held up as this like hero. He said some fucked up stuff in the past too. I mean, he's a white man. This is, again, one of those things like the professor I mentioned earlier. White men, quote unquote, facing consequences only happens when they're on the side of social justice, by the way, right? Because that's another pattern. If they're actual fascists, if they're actual white supremacists, if they're open, then it's freedom of speech and freedom of, whatever. So it's an interesting topic because while it needs to be commended, like it is an awesome thing that he didn't he didn't back down. He didn't, apologize and go, oh my gosh, I was wrong or whatever. But I'm also uncomfortable with the martyrdom of this man who is at the end of the day, a white British man, right? With all of the privilege. And it's awesome what he said. And I just wish more people had that same energy for standing up for all of the social justice issues, right? One of the main ones that comes to mind, well, racism is one, because they did the whole farcical, what's the word? Virtue signaling with Black Lives Matters patches and all that stuff. But what materially was actually done, right? The taking of the knee, several Black players after months of taking the knee came out to kind of be like, okay, we're not taking the knee anymore because it's become almost like just another thing to do. You know, the game starts, you come out of the tunnel, you sing you have the anthems, not the anthems in, you know, in England, but you have like that little moment, you take your pictures, you take a knee. It's almost like it became such a tradition that no one even thought about it anymore. It wasn't even meaningful anymore. So several folks were kind of like, okay, we're done with this. We have to do something real. So that's one issue. So yes, some folks did, you know, speak out against it, but not enough. No one boycotted, you know, nothing, I think, substantial happened. Another big problem is related to gender in many ways. One being the injustice and the misogyny of coverage and, you know, support for women's football. And also as it pertains to trans athletes. And we're seeing bills passed now, not just obviously related to sports, but bills passed that literally threaten the humanity of folks who are trans. And I have not seen one major figure like Gary Lineker speak out about it and be willing to lose their job over it. And so this is where I wonder, like, when something like this happens, it's awesome to all rally behind it and like applaud because it's baby steps, right? Maybe the next time, like, he'll take it a step further and whatever. But as a community of football supporters, are we too quick to celebrate someone for doing just the very bare minimum? And it's also fair that Gary Lineker truly believes in what he has values. Obviously, he did it not because a lot of people are like, oh, people like that do stuff for clout. I'm here to tell you and ask you, what clout, as a person who's unapologetically outspoken about everything, all it gets you is the opposite of clout. Like, people, until they, you know, people are really, really superficial. And if they see you succeeding, they'll pretend to, you know, to be your friend or to like you or whatever. But if they think you're too controversial, too radical or whatever, they'll want to distance themselves. Like, that works at every single level. So what clout do you get from standing up for what you believe in? Not that much. And there are people who are clout chasers and virtue signalers, but most of us can like really see right through that, right? So what clout could come of it? But why don't we see then folks following through more? Like, okay, now, you know, he wasn't on for a week, he's reinstated. What now? What now? Is he going to keep speaking out against this bill or the thing that was passed in England? Is he going to keep, you know, or is he now going to be like, well, I better keep my mouth shut? What changes if we don't all become a little bit more bold? If we don't bias our football content a little bit more? Why does no one, I mean, no one, and I love my personal friends at NBC, right? The Robbies, Rebecca, I love them so much. And there's been times where, especially the Robbies and Rebecca, it was because like Tim Howard is a joke. And he's like never been a good replacement for Kyle Martino, in my opinion. He's an idiot. But the Robbies and Rebecca are solid. They're serious. They're great people. And especially, you know, Robbie Earl has always been very, you know, serious about speaking about, you know, racism and things like this. But I don't think any of them really go far enough. Right. And like, I get, obviously, like Rebecca has had to fight misogyny her whole life. She's been in the game for 20 years. And like, she has to maintain a level of professionalism that she's held to a higher standard than men. And Robbie has had to deal with racism his whole life. So he is held to a higher standard than white men. Right. And so there's that aspect of it. But even them, you know, as much as I love them and I love to watch it, like, there's never a word about like true actual social justice issues. There's never a segment about like the injustice of these trans bills. There's never a segment about the injustice of, you know, women's soccer having so much less support and so many less resources. And I think I will talk about this a little bit more in the second half too, because I do want to kind of mention this as it pertains to US football fans and intersectionality. But I think we need to hold these public figures to a higher standard. It takes so little for us to applaud them, right? And then we accept so little. We're satisfied as a society with so little. Like for me, the Gary Lineker thing is like, okay, cool, awesome, great, and right? And what's next? And where are you putting your money where your mouth is? Are you fighting the, you know, the law? Are you out there? Are you making sure people are protesting or doing whatever? Like what action follows doing what you did, which is awesome. It was an awesome action to tweet. It was an awesome action to stand behind it and to just take the loss of not being on for a week because it brought attention to it, and attention's great and awareness is great. But are you now just going to go back like nothing happened? Because if that's the case, where did we get? Where's the progress? Right? And that's where I'm like, how we are so content with so little. And it also speaks to how fascist everything is, that very small gesture is celebrated as much as it is, because it's like, wow, this is the best we got. Like, that's pathetic. We need to hold them all to a higher standard. I love to watch my favorite couple on the Champions League broadcast team. I love Thierry Henry so much. Big Meeks, Micah and Kay Abdo are definitely a thing. I mean, like, they are. And we're so, like, everyone in my circle is like, yes, let's find all the evidence. They're so cute. Okay, that's such a great team as well. And they also leave it at the superficial. And obviously analysis is one thing. Part of their job is analysis, etc. But there's so many other segments they do that are fluff and superficial. They can't dedicate 10% of that time to like actually, you know, talking about real stuff that affects real people. No, because they're, you know, beholden to this idea, to this expectation of neutrality. And neutrality gives power to the oppressor. And that's where it's like you enjoy watching. I can speak for myself. I enjoy watching, and it's fun and funny to an extent. But I'm never like truly satisfied, right? And this is very colonizer country centric, like US and Europe centric, because in the global South, there's many outlets that are fascist for sure, but there's so many accessible ones, public free channels, especially when there's, you know, leftist presidents. They'll free up that, like TV companies, FIFA, and any corporation that stands to make money hates when there's leftist governments. Most fascists, most capitalists do hate when there's leftist governments, but because they put soccer on public TV, like on free TV, so no one makes money off it. Like Cristina Kirchner did it, Uruguay had it for a while until the fascists came, but it's awesome to do that, right? Like the accessibility of football. And when you have those types of broadcasts, it's people that have a commitment to social justice on some level, so they don't just sit there and talk fluff. There's always more to it, right? You can get some sort of analysis that at least has some sort of level of like, okay, there's no expectation of that like superficial childish neutrality that is just, to me, like, it's so gross. And so how can we hold these people accountable and encourage them to keep going? It's liberating. It's liberating, because even like in my small, you know, circle, like corner of the world, there was a time when I was younger, when I was a teenager, I've never not been like this. I've never not been like this, but there was a time where I would definitely mask it more. There was a time where I would definitely like pretend, and especially like in early college years, I would mask it more because it was scary because it's a lonely thing, especially to do as a young person, there's peer pressure, all that stuff. But once I started to really like just fly my radical flag, it's liberating. It's liberating to be like, I'm no longer scared because what is there to lose? Because it's way worse to have to hide these feelings, these thoughts, these emotions, this analysis, right? And so it's liberating. And so I think part of what we can do is encourage folks to continue to ask for Gary Lineker to say stuff, right? To continue to ask for all of them to be just a little more biased about it.
Hey, make sure to follow and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. And help us out by leaving a rating and review, and remember to share it with a friend. Don't forget to follow Franca on Twitter and Instagram at Francamente for the latest news. And lastly, please visit realfrancamente.com for bonus content, including articles, photos, and for more information about the podcast.
Back. Neutrality. Neutrality is giving power to the oppressor in every single space. And so when we're talking about, being outspoken and everything, there's a definite space where a lot more attention is needed, a lot more calling out is needed in terms of the way we look at gender inequality, not just as it pertains to women's football not getting the support it deserves, but the issue of trans athletes, right? At every level, we're seeing bills passed in the US to ban trans kids from playing sports. But also, and that's an issue that affects everyone, right? It affects everyone. It's an issue of support for folks who are marginalized. And I have never seen a word about this from any mainstream big name at all, ever. Never. Like, the people that talk about this are either in independent outlets, they either have their own podcast or they do their own thing, or are just like individuals who are speaking on their Twitter against it, right? And so what do we do with that? How can we be satisfied with folks just doing the bare minimum when we know that our trans siblings and our non-binary siblings are being erased from the narrative? Because when you have a narrative that is about ending transgenderism, a lot of them are hypocrites and they'll be like, no, I don't want trans people dead. I just don't want transgenderism. First of all, okay, who are you? Who is anyone? And a lot of people will use religion as their excuse, right? They'll be like, oh, because of the Bible. First of all, who the fuck cares about your Bible? How egotistical are you? First of all, the word transgender does not appear in the Bible. Let's start there, okay? But secondly, how egotistical are you that you think your religion, like, how self-centered and narcissistic are you that you think your religion, whatever you believe, should supersede whatever anyone else's belief is? How egotistical are you that you think that your religion can be used to pass laws in a place where we're supposed to have separation of church and state? And I say supposed to because we don't have it. Not to mention, and this would be a whole entire other podcast, but the people that call themselves Christian that use those things as an excuse to just hate others are not really Christian, right? We're all in agreement that those people are just like delusional fascists that like just need an excuse for their bigotry. Like they're not actual Christians, but how mystical to spend so much energy obsessing over what's in someone else's pants. That's creepy too. Like what, like why are we so obsessed with who anyone sleeps with who, what's in anyone else's pants if we're not their partner or in their life at all? Like there's it is so hard for me to wrap my brain around this level of narcissism, to pretend that you have a right to tell someone else what to do with their body. This could apply to anything. This could apply to abortions, right? It could apply to just like general healthcare, and it applies to trying to police people's bodies and transness. Transphobia is everywhere. It's everywhere, from your Harry Potter books to your football spaces. What are we doing about that? I have never seen the word transphobia used in an official capacity, in an official broadcast by an official, person who's one of those mainstream people. Big names, right? And there's players that are erased from that narrative. If you're non-binary, if you're trans. So why is our support conditional? Why is our support conditional, right? We'll be like, oh, yeah, like the bigots are like, oh, I'll support you as long as you just kick the ball. Don't say anything controversial, right? And that's just the minimum. But then from there, it's like, oh, if you come out as trans, that's political. Well, you're politicizing someone's gender, but that's a whole other thing. Let's even bring it down a step from transness to even just being gay. There is still not an openly gay male player in any of the world's biggest leagues. Do we think that means that there's no gay players? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. What this speaks to is how unsafe it is for folks to be themselves in the men's leagues. Now we've got openly gay women players, right, in those leagues. But it's still, we can't we still can't be super proud of that, because it goes to an extent too, right? Like there's the whole fetishization of like lesbians or bisexual women that comes into play. Like the fact that no male player has felt safe enough to come out says, because they definitely exist. I mean, it would, like, just in sheer numbers, it would be absurd right, if there was not any single ones. Like, of course they're there, they just don't feel safe to come out. And that speaks highly to homophobia, and it speaks highly to the fetishization of women being gay, because let's not act like that. What it is it's not support. It's not that people are more supportive of women by any means. I wish it were true. It isn't. It's not that people are more supportive of women being gay. It's there's a fetishization aspect, right? And there's also the aspect that people treat women's soccer like less than. And so they're like, oh, who cares? No one watches that anyway. Like, that's the attitude. That's why it's not more inclusive that there's openly gay women that play football and basketball. It's literally rooted actually in the same homophobia that doesn't let gay men be open about their sexuality. So we don't even have to go to transness. And then when we add that added layer, especially as we're seeing literal bills that are aiming to eradicate trans and non-binary folks from the narrative, it's scary. It's scary, scary times that we're living in. And there's also another thing related to women's football that I haven't talked about in an episode yet. And it's because it's a complex issue. As with everything else, I talked about this with MLS fans last time. I've talked about this with U.S. men's national team stands. U.S. national team stands supporting any gender and NWS stands are not that much better in terms of their imperialism, right? And so we need more intersectionality in the way that we watch and talk about women's football. First of all, there's a lot of virtue signaling. And it's disgusting. There's a lot of virtue signaling because people think it gets them clout, that this is where we get clout chasers to like virtue signal about women's football. And they'll say like the most, like, you know, you could just read the false, like just the falseness when they're like, oh my gosh, you know what I really hate? And this is so like contextually, it just speaks to something bigger, but I really hate when something happens, like stuff, you know, at the World Cup, records, you know, are broken, like so-and-so scores like this many goals, and outlets are like, oh, this is the first player to reach this many goals or whatever. And the people start to quote tweet with, well, the first men's player. And like, I think that's so, like, I know some people mean well that do that, but it's such like a virtue signally, like false, because rarely do those same people actually do anything for social justice. They just like, they're on Twitter, you know, they do their little thing. And so I really hate that attitude, but it's rooted in that imperialism, right? Because those same people that claim to care so much about women's soccer don't think about the privilege of being a woman playing football in the US or in England. There is still a lot of privilege there that we're not, you know, like white, you know how white women will victimize themselves and white feminists will try to censor themselves. Like that's US women's football supporters. Like, you know, obviously we have to talk about the inequality, but also let's look at the resources they have to even have a league when folks in the global South don't have that luxury. Okay. And there's never any recognition of this in this space. It's never like, you know, thankful to have a league. And also let's criticize the shit out of it because NWSA is corrupt as fuck. And many of those teams are corrupt as fuck too. And you'll see criticism of that, but you won't see acknowledgement of the fact that we're even lucky enough to have a league that exists because there's so many women in the global South that had to fight to even try to even play, right? I actually did an interview, and this is on the website, Francamente.com. The article I wrote was for Túnel, a magazine based in Uruguay, and it's all in Spanish. And I have video footage. Maybe we'll cut this together at some point to make a little video with one of the first women to be an official card-carrying member of AUF, the federation, the football federation, and hearing her story of what it was like back then and how little we've actually made progress. They were not allowed to play on the men's pitches. They would have to play on like any little patch of grass that they could find. They didn't get the luxury of having like cleats and stuff given to them. And so just the difference in resources that United States women's teams and like British women's teams have, I just don't see as much recognition or privilege. So we're still being so US centric by, you know, by not acknowledging that it's still a privilege to be able to support NWSL, right? And to be able to support the women's national team. And by the way, by supporting the US women's national team, you're still supporting imperialism because the US is an imperialist state. So a lot of people will be like, oh no, I don't support the men, I support the women. Like the women's team as if, and it's like, okay, intersectional imperialism is still imperialism, right? And so don't support either. Support women in the global south. I don't know. Like when they go to World Cups and they beat, global south teams 13-0, like don't celebrate that. Look at the difference in resources, okay, that there is, and like be a little humble, like humble yourself. Yeah, the women's national team in the US is way better than the men. And I'm not even talking comparatively, like I'm not even talking like for women, like literally, like they're 1,000 times better. They always have been. They've won several World Cups and the men suck. And that's just reality. And they dominate. And also, what does that look like in terms of socio-political, right? Like, can we be a little bit more nuanced? Because all of this is related to then the exclusion of trans folks, of gay folks, right? It is all connected. One of my favorite things to say, it's all connected, because that's when you analyze something through an anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist lens, you start to see these connections. Like, it is incompatible to reach any social justice in a capitalist imperialist state. It's never going to happen, because a capitalist imperialist state needs to feed off of the poor and the marginalized. Like, we need to exist so that billionaires can become richer, right? So when we don't take it that next step to criticizing the imperialism, the capitalism, the way we just sweep shit under the rug, right? And we're satisfied with so little. Like what Gary Lineker did is enough for us to be like, yeah, that's our hero. It's just not going to happen. We're not going to get anywhere, because we're not seeing enough like fundamentally transformative narratives around all of these social justice issues. Like we have to bias our football content. We have to denounce neutrality and abolish it. It's the only way. It's the only way. More of people getting taken off their shows for the weekend to raise awareness. Like more of that. Instead of being satisfied with it happening once, ask, why did he go back? Why? What is he going to do going forward? Right? Like, why aren't more people doing this? Like, those are the right questions to ask. And I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we'll get somewhere. Maybe we'll get somewhere in 10 years, 20 years. But all we can do is keep on fighting that good fight. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you liked it. It was a little bit of a mishmash, but I think we got there. This has been Francamente, the podcast. My name is Franca. I'm your host. Please make sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Real Francamente on both. And check out our website, www.realfrancamente.com. You can find a lot of the content there, or contact us directly with any questions, comments, etc. All links and ats will be in the show notes if you need them or want them, and for the ease of not having to spell anything yourself. Please subscribe on your favorite platform and maybe leave us a rating and a review if you like it, and share with your friends. Don't forget to bias your football content. Gracias y ciao.